It's good to have the throne. Hey there guys, welcome back to my channel. Just recently I was hit up by one of my viewers to review another channel and a video that they made that they would like me to take on, so I'm going to do that. This request comes from Ryan Barth, and he wants me to review JJ Plagiarisms. I can already tell this is going to end well. Now, I did already swing over to his channel and have a look, and surprisingly a lot of his content is relatively short, which is kind of a blessing for me because it's a real grind to have to sit through a 30-minute toxic spew fest of just listening to someone's sewage come dribbling out of their mouth, and it leaves me a tad exhausted. So the fact that a lot of his videos are only a couple minutes long, that's really great. And in fact, the video that Ryan wanted me to tackle, I think, is like 8 to 9 minutes, so that's great. Here it is. Sequel fans are not true Star Wars fans. I can already tell this is going to be good.
Oh boy, I can see the dislikes in the comments already, and it might be the most controversial thing I've ever said directly, but it's true. I was contemplating making this video, but I'm done being lenient towards sequel fans who to this day still don't properly understand why the movie is actually hated. They widely don't consider nuances at all and make incorrect statements about the opposition who hate the movie. The most egregious is that all the haters are just racist misogynists who hate women and don't support equality, blah 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 blah. Obviously that's the most blatant example, but people still don't understand the opposition on things like Luke Skywalker. So with that being said, I'm going to make a video pissing on sequel fans, but I don't care. They either don't understand the hate or contribute to the hate. I'm not going to make any friends after this video, but it has to be made. The sequel trilogy disrespected the original 6 movies. George Lucas hates The Last Jedi and probably the other 2 sequels to an extent.
Okay, right away he makes a claim, and where is your proof? Like, you can't just say things like that and just expect me to just be in immediate agreement with you. You need to provide proof with statements like that, otherwise you're just talking out of your ass. Because, I mean, I can just say, oh, Lucas loved the sequel trilogy. I'm not going to back anything up with that because you're already in agreement with me, right? See, it's absurd. So if you don't back up anything that you say with physical evidence, like quotes or videos like I have in my previous videos talking about these kind of things, you come across as quite dishonest.
Not only did they do that, but it invalidated everything that happened in the original 6 movies. The case I'm making is that the sequels are not authentic and they are disrespectful. It's a given that a truly authentic work in a franchise has to be done by the original creator.
Says who? Like, never mind the multiple different IPs from Marvel to Star Trek and Star Wars and DC as well that have worked on making other stories that were not made by their original creators and are still considered legit. Like, he says it's a given. Well, apparently no one told these other franchises like Marvel, DC, Star Wars, Star Trek, all the other ones, or especially with Star Wars with what's now considered legends, with all those books that were created. I highly doubt Lucas approved of all of them, but it was still widely considered as legit Star Wars. In fact, you still have a wide variety of the fan base that claims that the Legends version of Star Wars is far more legitimate than the sequel era. So I don't see how this is going to play well for you in your logic there at all. Like, that's some absurd elitist gatekeeping shit.
And only the original creator, given he is the one who created it. Anything else without the original creator's approval is just fan fiction. This doesn't make every fan fiction bad, but it highlights the original creator's meaning is the correct one.
And whatever could have possibly given you the notion that you were the authority on what qualifies as fan fiction. That's some rather pretentious and absurd shit to be saying for someone who's not actively working for these companies. Like, these could just be your opinion. That's fine, but don't act like it's objective law, because we're dealing with art which is subjective by nature in every possible factor. You may not like it and you're free to not support it, but the only ones who have the authority to decide what is legit and what is fan fiction are the companies creating them.
You have no power here.
You see, a lot of The Last Jedi, for example, defenders assume that what I say about Star Wars is just my interpretation, which is wrong. If I'm gonna say something like, Rian Johnson ruined Star Wars, or Rian Johnson doesn't understand Star Wars, then the basis of that is based from George Lucas himself. Let's use an example. Balance in the Force. Rian Johnson thought balance in the Force meant equal Jedi and equal Sith. What it actually means is elimination of the dark side because it is unnatural and destructive to life.
Aside from him not providing proof if Rian actually said anything like that, most fans, even before The Last Jedi was made, assumed this as well, as they interpreted Anakin as the legit chosen one of the prophecy because he, technically speaking, got the amount of Jedi and Sith down to equal numbers at the end of the prequels. If there was a misunderstanding, that's due to Lucas's confusing prophecy he poorly explained. Even still, I don't see where the point of The Last Jedi has anything to do in discussing the interpretation of this concept.
This is from George Lucas himself. This is not debatable.
Everything's debatable, especially when at a time of the creation of the sequels, Lucas had long sold the rights away to Star Wars, so his opinion on what that means is about as relevant as mine, yours, or anyone else's. If he also failed to apply this logic into the movies, which he did, then this isn't an issue of right and wrong for those making the sequels. This is just the new interpretation being built on where it was left hanging. If Lucas doesn't like that, he shouldn't have sold the franchise before inputting that logic somewhere in the movies.
Rian Johnson was dead wrong, which means he contradicted the law set up by the original creator.
Wrong being a subjective opinion in this context, but, whatever.
So let me ask you this. Sequel fans, after learning that Rian Johnson was without a shadow of a doubt wrong in his interpretation, or his shitty guess in what balance in the Force meant, why would you still defend the product?
Because they're fun. Like the original trilogy.
Not once have I come across a sequel fan who came across like he or she wasn't biased in some way.
Everyone is biased. Even you, whether you admit it or not. So it's sort of an irrelevant point to make. If someone likes something, you calling them biased about it doesn't really mean anything.
Enjoying it is one thing, but saying that it's a true Star Wars movie is disrespectful. You cannot be both a sequel fan and a Star Wars fan.
False. Do you like the sequels? Do you like Star Wars? Do you think they're one and the same thing? Anyone else who's watching? If you answered yes, yes you are. Both a sequel fan and a Star Wars fan. Or you would just probably, like myself, would just call myself a Star Wars fan. Because the sequels are a part of Star Wars. They are Star Wars. Whether this guy likes to acknowledge it or not. Sorry. And when the movies uphold the other teachings Star Wars has stood for in the past, it's hardly disrespectful. Just because the select few things you point out as wrong doesn't match up with the original trilogy's creator's intentions that he never applied in the movies that he had control of at the time of owning the product, owning the franchise, because Star Wars is more than just the interpretation of the balance of the Force. It's also about standing up and uniting against tyranny, recognizing what leads to tyranny, diving into the concepts of good and evil, and the nuances of what makes a person do bad things, and can a person be redeemed even after doing so much horrible shit? It's so much more than these select few things you hyper focus on just to have any kind of mud to sling. Why don't you talk about all those other failures? Unless you can't, because the films do a good job of upholding those values.
Because the sequels disrespect Star Wars in many ways. balance in the Force, Luke Skywalker, hyperspace, etc.
Okay, talk about those things. Why do you just assume I know what you're talking about?
The Last Jedi, for example, on top of that, is filled with political nonsense that does not belong. This is a bold statement, but every single sequel fan is someone who subconsciously agrees with Rian Johnson's political ideology expressed in the film. And everyone who subconsciously disagrees or sees the forced political messages like me hate the movie. Contrary to what they say, Rian Johnson did not make a Star Wars movie for everyone. The original 6 Star Wars movies did not promote ideas like Republicans are good, Democrats are bad.
Where is that ever brought up in The Last Jedi? Sure, there are political messages, the dangers of unrestricted capitalism that involve child slavery, which even the prequels stood against. And while true, the other subjects like animal abuse and rich arm dealers selling to both sides of a war to get rich are not expressly mentioned in the other Star Wars trilogies, they are sort of a standard of if you're a piece of crap or not. And for you to be upset that such politics are being forced into Star Wars, I think that says a lot more about you than the sequels.
When it came to politics, it was more broad as in how corruption happens and how democracies turn into dictatorships, stuff like that. Star Wars is not about feminism or gay rights.
Okay, let's stop him there. Star Wars is not about feminism. Okay, that right there should invalidate literally everything he has said and everything he's going to say. If you're not aware that Leia is a feminist icon and that Lucas continued to create other strong female characters like Ahsoka and others to push feminist ideology into Star Wars, you only expose the only one who doesn't understand Star Wars is you. As for gay rights, Star Wars has preached unity and fighting for equality before. Perhaps not in the original trilogy or the prequels as much, but 100% in the Clone Wars saga that Lucas created. Or does that not suddenly count when it contradicts your narrative? Just curious.
I don't have an issue with either, of course, but forced representation does not belong in Star Wars.
I don't have an issue with either of those, of course. Key word there, but.
Everything before the word but is horseshit.
If you have to bring it up as an issue, you have an issue with it. Don't hem and haw and try and save face. There's not a but that follows treating people equally.
This is another way the sequels disrespect the original 6 movies, because it doesn't present morality the way George Lucas did. The Last Jedi, again, is actually pretty nihilistic on how it portrays morality. The film literally has zero morality. There's no good or evil, just nihilism.
Snoke and the First Order and Palpatine are evil, Rey and the Resistance are good. That is clear as day to see, or did I miss something when the First Order was gunning down women and children? And that they're secretly the good guys? Or is it that Kylo is a villain that later becomes good? Because that's literally no different than what happens with Vader.
The Lord of Hunger would be outclassed by Rian Johnson, going by the direct definition. The Last Jedi is terrible a lot because it doesn't adhere to the correct meaning of Star Wars. The Last Jedi was Rian Johnson's incorrect interpretation on what Star Wars meant. He didn't bother to research George Lucas or the true meaning behind the story. Thus, he made a widely hated film. Again, this is not my interpretation. It is the correct meaning according to George Lucas himself and how he explains his work. I also don't think that sequel fans understand that sequel hate goes beyond the films themselves.
Which is funny that you mention it because Lucas's own work literally states those who deal in absolutes are evil. Just as you do trying to use Lucas as your absolute to hammer your weak points home. Furthermore, Lucas's work literally warns against those who obsess over their anger and hatred over something, just as you are doing. Once again, you ironically seem to be making the case for the teachings of Star Wars as being the exact kind of person Star Wars, the sequels included, protested against people being to one another.
Let me put it like this. I wouldn't respect the films even if I liked them. George Lucas was backstabbed by Bob Iger, as admitted in the traitor's self-biography. This is coming from the head of Disney in his own words. This is not some fake news spread around by Mike Zero. It is a confirmed, undeniable, irrefutable fact.
Okay, so I know I'm backtracking a little here because I feel like what he said earlier perfectly flows into what he says next about Bob Iger's betrayal of Lucas. Because he says, I wouldn't respect the films even if I liked them. Yeah, that's called not having integrity. If you like something but don't respect it, what does that say about you? You can like and respect something, but when you like something but don't respect it, transfer that over to a person. If you like someone but you don't respect them, why are you hanging out with them? Why do you even like them if you don't respect them? This perfectly translates over to his next point because he goes into how Bob Iger cheated and stole Star Wars from Lucas as he tries to make this point. And let's talk about Lucas's history and relationship with Mr. Iger and Disney, because we can moan and whine all we want about the dealings that went into Lucas selling Star Wars, but afterwards, the guy called them white slavers. And then proceeded to continue working with them, not once, not twice, but on 3 separate occasions. And that's what's called not having integrity either. I know, crazy as it sounds, but believe it or not, I could acknowledge Lucas's contributions to Star Wars and acknowledge him as the rightful original founder. I can acknowledge his ideologies he's put into Star Wars that I 100% agree with, but I can also criticize him when he says or does something stupid because I'm not shackled to the guy by holding him up as an authority figure the way this guy does while he's jerking him off. If you call someone a white slaver and continue to work with them, you either don't believe in what you say or someone being a slaver isn't a deal breaker for you. And I'm 100% allowed to criticize that absurdity without having my fandom card revoked by this gatekeeper spouting nonsense.
I tried flat out asking sequel fans in their comment section on YouTube as to why they support Disney given these events. None of them properly answer the question or express hatred towards George Lucas.
Well, that would determine what you qualify as properly. Given this guy's lunacy, I can only imagine the restrictions he might place on the answers I'm allowed to give. But here's my answer. When you spend $4 billion to acquire an IP, you can do with it whatever the hell you want, regardless of what verbal promises you might have given that were not included in the actual contract itself. Is that considered lacking tact? Sure. Does that mean whatever they make is good? No, not necessarily, but once you own the rights to something, it's yours. That's sort of the point. And while JJ here tries to pretend it has some malicious dealing with Bob Iger, he even reflects in the book he should have handled it differently. Maybe my mindset can be seen as a little cold, but I guess as someone who can't possibly fathom the idea of getting $4 billion for anything, I find myself hard to sympathize with a guy who got more money in a day than most of us will get a fraction of in our lifetimes.
Like trying to dismiss that George Lucas doesn't have a say anymore when he's actually the most important voice on how Star Wars is doing.
Now, while he casually tries to dismiss the fact Lucas sold the rights to Star Wars away to Disney, whether he likes it or not, that is in fact sort of the end of the man's opinion holding any further relevance. If he wanted to remain in a place where he could continue to have his voice heard and his wishes followed, he shouldn't have sold it. His opinion, regardless of his contribution prior, now carry as much weight as you or I. You may wish that were not the case, but you can blame the fandom that chased Lucas into the arms of Disney to begin with. And despite you providing no proof that sequel fans hold any disdain for the prequels, there is, however, plenty of proof that the ones who chased Lucas away were those like JJ Plagiarisms and the fandom menace, who both share this same animosity towards sequel fans for the crime of enjoying movies.
He's not allowed to speak though.
False! He 100% has the right to speak. His voice just carries no more weight than the rest of us known as the fandom, which can be seen as saddening to some, but it is a situation caused by his own doing.
Which is saddening. Disney lied to him and acquired Star Wars, and because of arrogance, they made 3 shitty sequel movies, which all bombed from a critical level.
Between the 3 films, they collectively made $4 billion, and The Last Jedi had year-long Blu-ray sales. Maybe not try and slide your opinion in for the facts, bud.
If only they had listened to George Lucas. How could you possibly be a fan of the sequels after learning all this?
I wonder what could have caused Disney to discount Lucas's ideas. It couldn't possibly be that before the sequels came out, there was still animosity towards the prequels and Lucas's competence as a director and a storyteller that was stained across the internet by angry little fellows like this. Oh wait, that's more than likely exactly what it was.
They either don't know about these events, or they don't like George Lucas. Either way, it's ignorance or malicious hatred.
No, it's just Disney made better Star Wars movies than Lucas's last 3, and people like them. Because they're not obsessed about the behind-the-scenes nonsense regarding billionaires like you are. Sure, that might be considered ignorance, but ignorance of what? A man getting paid billions of dollars to sell a franchise? Oh, boo-hoo! Malicious intent? If I'm anything to go on, best you got is indifference. It's all fiction, bud. If someone makes Star Wars that's not Lucas and I enjoy it, I don't really care who's the one making it so long as it upholds the story's original virtues that I believe they have. And it's your opinion and nothing more to the contrary.
Tell me, after all that Disney has done to George Lucas and Star Wars, why do you stand by the middle finger to Star Wars itself?
Because between the two of us, I uphold Star Wars teachings that preach unity, understanding, hope, and optimism. And I'm wary of those trying to work me into a rage over something that at the end of the day is fiction. None of it is real. The only thing that holds weight in it for me is the messages it preaches. So long as I'm in agreement, I have little else to say in the matter.
They are not authentic Star Wars movies. Just because Disney have the rights does not mean what they make is authentic.
False. Because neither you nor I have any authority in what qualifies as authentic. You have your opinion on that matter, which is fine, but it is neither the authority nor the standard. They can be to you, but clearly neither Disney nor Lucasfilm recognizes you as an authority. And at the end of the day, their word counts for more than ours. Period. It doesn't necessarily make what they make good, it just means they are the ones who set the standards. So you don't have to like it, but that is just your opinion at the end of the day.
The intellect cannot be replicated, only imitated. But the sequels did a poor job at that. As I've explained, to those who still support the sequels after learning these proven facts, you are in denial. The Force Awakens is a rehashed mess, The Last Jedi is the most pretentious movie ever, and The Rise of Skywalker is a backtracking, yet dangerously harmful mess to the franchise. If you want to tell me I'm spouting fake news like Mike Zero, you are denying irrefutable evidence. I have not come across a single Last Jedi fan who convinced me they truly cared or understood anything about Star Wars. Many sequel fans hate the prequels too. Most of them love how Rian Johnson disregarded the past. Hence the line, let the past die.
And if you were at all paying attention to the movie and not sitting around with your head up your butt, you would know that The Last Jedi literally contradicts that line later in the film, when Kylo is spouting similar things to Luke, who responds with,
I will have killed the last Jedi!
Amazing. Every word of what you just said was wrong.
rather fitting in this context, really. The movie, in part, is literally about proving Kylo wrong. And the fact this guy hyper-focuses on that and doesn't acknowledge that the rest of the movie firmly stands against that ideology proves he either did not pay attention enough to have his views on the films even be considered credible, or he has no interest in the truth.
This is the most blatant a case as I can make it. Sequel fans are not true Star Wars fans. They don't understand what Star Wars is, nor do they respect the creative process. Either that, or they are unaware of how it all works. I made this video because I'm sick of having to be lenient with sequel fans. The Last Jedi is a symbolic middle finger to Star Wars and George Lucas. Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams didn't care about continuity, only their own visions, a vision that contradicted the George Lucas saga. The Last Jedi is not a true Star Wars film, not only because it had nothing to do with George Lucas, but because they changed, contradicted, or ignored his vision. This is not debatable. This is why I found it hard to respect Last Jedi fans, or take them seriously when they say they love Star Wars, because they either misunderstand the franchise, or don't care about the many things the film gets dead wrong. I feel the only way to get it through to Last Jedi fans that their cult film sucks is by denouncing them for ignoring the creative process, and Disney's treatment of George Lucas. This image of an overweight Rian Johnson sums up better in words my feelings on the movie.
Coming from a guy who has repeatedly shown he learned nothing from what the original trilogy of Star Wars preached, this means very little. The original trilogy and what he deems as the real Star Wars would not condone this fixation on hate and hinge respect on the differences of opinions over fiction. His entire attitude about denouncing those who disagree with him once again ironically fall deftly on the very teachings that Lucas himself preached in the prequels with this my way or the highway attitude.
If you're not with me, then you're my enemy.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
If he truly cannot see his own behavior is outright condemned on what he claims to be protecting, his sense of entitlement clearly is blinding him from reality.